Herzlich willkommen im Gestaltcafé. Schön, dass du hier bist. Hier kannst du inspirierenden Gesprächen rund um das Thema Gestalttherapie lauschen. Ganz nach dem Motto des gleichnamigen Buches von Irving Polster, jedes Menschenleben ist einen Roman wert, möchte ich in diesem Podcast mit meinen InterviewpartnerInnen die Gestaltarbeit erlebbarer und zugänglicher machen. Mein Name ist Katharina Renke. Ich bin Gestalttherapeutin und angehende Psychologin und ich wünsche dir viel Spaß beim Zuhören. Herzlich willkommen im Gestaltcafé Podcast. Heute bin ich im Gespräch mit Dr. Yousef Kayyali aus Kalifornien und wir sprechen über Forschung in der Gestalttherapie. Und zwar erzählt er uns anhand persönlicher Einblicke in seine Doktorarbeit und auch in den Schreibprozess und in den Prozess des Austausches mit Kollegen, was für Forschungsmethoden werden in der Gestalttherapie verwendet, welche Messinstrumente gibt es, also sowas wie Persönlichkeitsfragebogen, wie werden die über die Zeit hinweg weiterentwickelt, was gibt es da vielleicht auch für Zersplitterungen im Bereich der Gestalttherapie aufgrund unterschiedlicher Konzepte und Herangehensweisen. Also das ist ein sehr, sehr spannendes Gespräch gewesen mit einem sehr humorvollen und charmanten Doktor der Psychologie. Ich wünsche euch ganz viel Spaß beim Zuhören. Welcome, Yousef Kayyali, today in the Gestalt CAFÉ podcast. Where are you right now, Yousef?
I'm in a very good place in space. I finally get to meet you in well, not quite in person, but close as it can get with Zoom. And I've quite enjoyed watching your work and interacting with you via email and mobilizing the energy and the courage to join you today, to be here.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of physical, geological,
yeah. Oh goodness, we weren't getting existential. Okay, I'm here in Orange County in Irvine, California, sunny Southern California. This is where I consider home. I love it out here, and feel very grateful to have the opportunity to be out here.
And that's also the area where you actually already got your first year of training as a future Gestalt therapist in LA, right?
That's right. So I've been training with GATLA, Gestalt Associates Training Los Angeles, and it has been really breathtaking and surreal. I've been impassioned with Gestalt for quite some time now, since 2011.
Yeah.
But in terms of the actual praxis and clinical experience where it's recommended or it's supported instead of, well, I would have done something different or I would have done it differently, it's encouraged to do the experiential versus the more kind of safe, calculated, manualized version of treatment. So it's wonderful. I'm in my second year now currently at GATLA.
Right. And how did I get to know about you? Maybe that's also important for the listeners to understand our relationship. I'm currently doing a research for my undergraduate thesis about resistance in Gestalt therapy. And I was reading your doctoral dissertation about resistance processes and how they're related to experience of Gestalt therapists. And that's how I reached out to you and got very curious to talk to you about research in Gestalt therapy. But as I already warned you, let's start with a little more practical approach. Yesterday, you sent me a quote which also describes a lot, I think, our email conversations. We were putting out some quotes there that touched us like emotionally. And I would like to share this with our listeners, first of all. what light is for seeing, body movement is for feeling, from Merleau-Ponty. And letting this land, I was thinking that I would like to ask you, first of all, like, now I mean, it's the first time I see you here on the screen, but how do you feel right now? What yeah, could you share a little bit about your awareness process?
Yes, I feel both exhilarated and excited while also feeling nervous and a little scared. Part of that is the excitement and the idea of, am I going to talk too much? Am I going to say the wrong thing? Is that me, friend, the imposter syndrome going to come back? And then the other part of me is, no, wait, hang on a sec. This is exactly where I belong. And this is a wonderful setting. And you're creating a very contactful environment. So I think that side's a little bit more pronounced for me right now in my body.
I'm happy to hear that. Yeah. Well, me, for my part, I was going through all the discussions we had via email this morning, and I tried to kind of prepare for this interview. So I also got a little bit of tension, but like a positive stress, I would say. And out of that, I would like to ask you and to start diving into the content of today. To ask you, first of all, how come that you actually took the decision to spend several years contributing with your work to research in Gestalt therapy? Because when I talk to friends that are currently writing their doctoral dissertation, I know that it's a lot of work and it costs a lot of effort and energy. And I was just wondering, how come that Gestalt therapy wanted to make you writing a thesis? Yeah.
Oh, goodness, Katerina. Are we sure you want to start with that question? We might not have enough time. How much time do we have today? That's such a thoughtful and intriguing question. There's so many perspectives to it, and maybe I'll start with the most passionate one. Gestalt therapy changed my life, and I felt that it would be incumbent, or it should behoove me, to share what I thought was liberation, and especially when faced with other approaches that I found tend to be very kind of othering or overly analytical or interpretive, and just kind of othering of alterity and diversity. And so for me, it was really important for me to take ownership of, applying what I learned interpersonally. And at one point, I was such a zealous, impassioned graduate student that I said, I'm going to dedicate my life to the advancement of Gestalt therapy. And I had a supervisor say, whoa. So it's like, I meant business then, and I think I mean business even more today, which has been wonderful. Every year it gets stronger. So to be able to work with Ansel Wolt, which was a real privilege, and and to be, he chaired over 100 dissertations at Kent State University, and he gave me access to some data and a measure, and it was wonderful to be able to participate, because the sad thing is Gestalt therapy was born in New York, and now it is really kind of at risk here in the evidence-based milieu we find ourselves, where it's more popular in Europe. But it's not, in my opinion, it's really, researchers aren't getting serious enough about, and I've mentioned that in my dissertation, and I think the risk we have is, if we don't empirically validate what we do, and there's a lot to empirically validate, we're at risk of losing out. And that's just a disservice for people that are looking for something with a little bit more long-term, I'd say, longevity, sustainability of holistic health and growth.
Yeah, yeah. So I hear there's this initial sensation of liberation that you connect to Gestalt therapy, and then there is your urge for contributing also for other people, that they are able to get access to Gestalt therapy, which will be in the future only possible if there's enough empirical evidence. Is that kind of what you said?
I'd say that's right on the mark. Yeah, and
Okay.
I'm curious also what has brought you, because there's no denying your passion in your work, and even in this here and now moment between us in this shared space. If you're comfortable sharing, what gravitated you to the Gestalt approach?
I think first of all, that I was able to already get into practice while studying psychology, because psychology is my second degree. So I was already a little bit fed up of sitting in a university and only taking in, introjecting all the time. So I was taking the decision when studying psychology that I want to already get a practical formation training. And that's, I think, the main part of it. And this is a little bit sad, actually, because I was only able to do that as a not without having a master degree in psychology, because Gestalt therapy in Germany by now is not yet part of the governmental social security system. So there is a bittersweet note of that.
Well, glad to have you, and we can't have enough of that. I mean, I think what you're doing is just so fascinating. You're really embodying it in your interviews. It's undeniable.
Thank you. Well, and talking about your research, you already mentioned WALT, right? So for people who haven't heard of WALT, and also who haven't been in touch a lot with research in Gestalt therapy, maybe we could talk a little bit about the concept of personality, of the tests that are used in Gestalt therapy. So to get a little bit an insight into the research field that you've been moving in while writing your dissertation.
Wow, the sequel lived up to the original. Your questions are on fire today. Yes, that's a heavy question. I'll tell you why. I think it's a heavy question because it's another urge for people to come together and integrate something for our times, to organize it. Because there's a lot of variance in Gestalt therapy today, from the figure formation cycle of experience to the conceptualization of contact interruptions or resistances, whatever your language is, to the reconsideration of the contact resistances in Gordon Wheeler's Gestalt Reconsidered. So we have quite a multitude here of reconsidered ideas of what it means to get in touch with ourselves, others in the world. In the spiritual existential field, which I don't think is talked about a lot. Philip Brownell talks about that. So for me, another area of interest is, in my dissertation, I had to figure out a way to organize for my own sanity, right? Or otherwise I would never have finished the dissertation. So I went with Ansel Wolt's conceptualization with the cycle of experience and 7 contact resistances, which is very similar to the language Pearl's used. So I found, but today that's looked at as there's mixed reception to the word resistance and to the idea that contact resistance, depends on your flavor. Some people don't view, for example, some of the contact interruptions as contact interruptions. So that's kind of where I get intrigued in our meeting. And I find, I think Gestalt, while I want it to be contemporary and to evolve, I'm also a little bit skeptical about revising some of the core tenets and making, I don't want it to go antithetical to the original formulation. That doesn't mean I'm not able to creatively adjust. It just means that there are certain staples and pillars and foundations, I think, that make it an important integration of other things. And those to me don't seem as negotiable as, for example, what's a contact interruption and that.
Right. So what stands out for me is that you said that you at some point, in order to really get started with writing your dissertation and with also choosing maybe the measurement methods and everything, you needed to actually pick or go with one of the concepts of, in your case, contact resistance that is out there in the research field.
Yeah.
Have you met Wold and Prosnick in person?
Unfortunately, no. Our email has been purely through email, and I have to say those two gentlemen have been incredible. And you would never know we never met in person. The playfulness, the hilarity, and their humor is second bar none. I mean, they're hilarious, and that's one of the things that made working with them a joy, along with Susan Grossman and Mary Plank and Monique Rodriguez in the dissertation process. And I've had a lot of help from a lot of wonderful people like Mark Breck and just tons. I couldn't list them all, but obviously, the big time inspirations are the Pearls, the Polsters, the Resnicks. There's just a list. And I've found it very interesting to see deflection being argued in the literature about whether or not it's a contact resistance between Miriam Polster and Joel Latner. And I thought that was hilarious to really get the phenomenology, the meaning making of each, and where do I stand? Where do I show up in this? And so some of them seemed core, and it was healthy to find something to stick with. And at that time, in those field conditions, that was what was most palatable or salient for me. That's what I could integrate, is the conceptualization Ansel had worked with.
What I was, I think it's already very deep into the topic, but what I was seeing while reviewing some of the literature about Gestalt resistances is that it's also a lot about the method you actually choose in the end of the day, how to measure. That also goes along with how you actually see Gestalt resistance. So, for example, whether it's a case study or it's like a personality questionnaire, it's a very different approach to to the concept itself. But maybe just to make it a little bit more, do you say tangible?
That's it. Yep, tangible.
Yeah, tangible for people. What would you say is the measurement method that you use? How would you describe it? Because I think a lot of people don't even know about the GIRL. What is it like?
Yeah.
So the Gestalt inventory of resistance loadings is you measure 7 contact resistances. That's the language they stick with, which is aligned with the founders. And it looks at the idea of resistance as, if it's like, for example, introjection, there's a little bit of that in all of them, which is taking in something without really getting a chew for it, just swallowing it whole. Without actually assimilating it or seeing if it fits. And so what I really liked about the GIRL at the time was it advanced 2 additional resistances that I was not aware of in the literature, in desensitization and egotism. Now, these are not like across the board assimilated in other Gestalt literature, unfortunately, and this seems to be an issue as well in terms of the measures to agree on. And again, we don't even agree on what it is to begin with, but it's important because it's the foundation of personality theory in Gestalt, is the self and how how we meet our needs. And the premise is aligned with the literature of how we get in touch with ourselves is predictive of health. And so by that notion, resistance would be blocking regulation and getting needs met. And that's certainly true based on contextual relevancy. If you do something that's blind, like outside of awareness and it's habitual, or as Bob Resnick used to say, anachronistic, meaning ana, meaning wrong, chronos, meaning time, then it becomes a pollutant. Maybe it was nourishing for regulation, but it becomes a pollutant today. So that's what really got me intrigued with the notion. And Ansel and Kevin, Walt and Resnick talked about that in their work, that it was important to look at the field conditions of the resistance. But at the same time, I really agree with the pollsters in that contact is the lifeblood of human growth, right? And if everyone interrupted contact and isolated, I don't think growth and awareness and connection and authenticity and wholeness happen in isolation in a cave or in a vacuum. I think we need each other. We're interdependent, and that's where we discover who we are, where I end, where you begin.
And talking about maybe the field theory that you just mentioned, I would be interested in, I'm trying to find the words at the moment, in for your future practice as a Gestalt therapist. Do you think it is helpful to have such measurements, such a personality item for your own practice? That's a question that is not related to the measurement method as itself, that it might not be useful, that for your own practice?
It's a great question. I struggle with that. I find myself at an impasse with that, because on one hand, I think it's important for a theory. And I think good praxis is informed by theory, and also sometimes the other way around. And at the same time, it's a little bit hard to understand someone. I really do believe, it got mistranslated, but the whole is other than the sum of its parts, right? And so if I look at the individual parts, I can try to organize and understand in field conditions, but it's really going to be different than the whole. And I can't really understand what it's like to be that person. So I get a little bit cautioned about being overly interpretive with scales, etc. But I think it's important. I just wish we would have more comprehensive scales, which would include transfluence and proflection and whatever is yet to be discovered, because I reckon that there's a little bit more. I suspect there's a little bit more than what we have. I think the human personality is very spirited and creative, and there's plenty of things that can go wrong, and of course plenty of things that can go right. And this is where I get excited, is that I feel, unfortunately, I agree with Gordon Wheeler on this. I think the best Gestalt theory is lagging in comparison vis-a-vis the best Gestalt practice. That's kind of a split that I'm hoping to resolve.
Right. Oh, I'm actually I'm a little bit more relaxed when you say that, and I'm very, very grateful that I can also overcome my own prejudices about quantitative research methods in the field of Gestalt therapy that clash in sometimes so much with the spontaneous idea of the individual acting in an individual field, and is driven by spontaneous needs and also resources in the field, and not
that makes me feel in turn more comfortable too. I wasn't sure where that would land with you. I wasn't sure how that would be read. I tend to be a little bit of an idealist with my ways, but I just ask that people get a chew for it before they make an opinion, and be critically thoughtful of, there's a lot of unfortunate oppression in our field with labeling, and Kierkegaard said, whoever labels me negates me, and so I'm very reluctant to label people and create
I didn't understand that. I think in terms of English, what did Kierkegaard said?
Kierkegaard said that whatever labels me negates me, which means it kind of others me. It creates, the way I interpret it is, it kind of creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of, it's like if you read about the DSM, for example, if you read about it long enough, eventually you'll have every disorder. In my experience, in graduate school, I had every one of them at one point because of iatrogenic effects. And so as a Gestalt therapist in training, I'm more interested in wholeness and what we get right and accentuating our strengths, not pathologizing our deficits, because there's plenty of those. Freud pointed that out. But I'm really interested in how do we maximize what Esalen Institute, which was a wonderful interview, by the way, with your interview, with your Gestalt trainer.
Thank you.
About how do we reach the human potential? That's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in pathologizing and colonizing people's phenomenology, as Bob Resnick would say. I would rather trust that the person is the expert of their experience, and I have some maybe book expertise and clinical experience, but I'll never know what it's like to be the other.
So what comes into my mind reading your abstract just before our interview, you said that your results in your doctoral dissertation would very much contribute to the evidence that Gestalt therapy is really helpful for the words are missing, that an individual is overcoming their resistances.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure if this is what these research method can do for in your idea for a branch of psychotherapy, that actually the evidence is what helps, or what the goal is for you.
That's right. I wanted to change the world with my dissertation. I had to get humbled with the results being mixed in some sections. And I think there was enough empirical support to support things we kind of know that seem obvious, but then when they happen, it might not be that obvious. But for example, age tends to make people less resistant because they get more comfortable, I think, in my opinion, that this is me, this is not me, and that's okay. They have more support. And we know that in some of the research where we've compared Gestalt therapy, it's hard, it's nebulous, it's hard to operationalize the constructs. What does authentic mean, right? What does congruent mean? What does wholeness mean? It's very hard to research this stuff. It takes truly brilliant minds to come up with the scales that I've fortunately been, had the privilege to work with. But how do we find a way to help people, right? That's the most important thing. And I think there's a lot, because we look at research, we see not only does Gestalt most often than not match other approaches and share consilience, as Brownell would talk about, and have pieces assimilated today that seemed ludicrous in the 60s when they emerged, like relationship. Who else? That's not important. That's a stage you get through, right? Or horizontality, like that's not important. You're the expert. And now we're seeing it assimilated today, right? It just shows you the remarkable contribution genius of where it's led. And so I think there's a lot. When we look at the comparison studies, we see it not only matches, but it surpasses a lot of the times. Things with Greenberg, for example, an empty chair from EFT, emotion focused therapy.
And I think
I have to ask again. It
Sure.
not only matches, but it surpasses. What does that mean?
Yeah, so that's the way I've looked at it. Is the authors, some of the research I've looked at in my dissertation was they talked about perhaps it works at the procedural level for things not just in the scope of therapy, whereas like you're changing thoughts and behaviors or your approach to emotions, but you're changing the how, as Pearls would talk about, right? It's not the why, which could take forever. We could find it 20 years laying on the couch, and maybe it's still not satisfying. It's what you're doing, how you're doing it, and where is it happening, right? It's about the here and now and what interrupts the here and now in the past and the future, etc. Mm-hmm. So I think contact resistance is a very nice apparatus to gauge that, and to, as Bob Resnick would say, interrupt people's interruptions and help them organize in a way that's consonant with their field and their choices. We're not trying to change people. We're not trying to make people more emotional, unless that's what the situation entails. We don't want people to be a character, which is stuck in this idea that I always have to be a certain way. That's where I get worried about contact. Projection. I mean, Pearls talked about art is the healthiest form of projection. So it can be helpful, but not when you're, thinking you're looking out the window, but you're really looking in the mirror. That's harmful for people when you disown parts of yourself onto others, right? So it's fascinating. And I think, the resistances are interesting. I do hold on to them a little loosely, though, maybe more than other Gestaltists, because I don't claim to know how to operate people's owner's manual better than they, which is a little unsatisfying for a lot of folks. They want that structure. Tell me how to think, tell me what to do, tell me how to be. And I think that robs people of discovery and awareness and growth. So when we look at them comparatively, I think what we offer is not just a theoretical way to ameliorate suffering, but a viable life philosophy, as Gary Yontef would talk about, right? We teach people, the how, the what, not so much the why, which is important. But I think when we get into the here and now, what are you doing and how are you doing it? And that's where contact becomes really important.
That
was a mouthful. Yeah. I'm sorry about that.
That's totally okay. I'm very happy that, we can also talk about how you do your research, right? Like with which state of mind or with which intention. It's interesting. Yeah, I'm just wondering what listeners might be interested into, and then I was like, oh no, maybe I should just listen to what I'm interested in. What by the way, Bob Resnick died recently, right?
Yeah, that's been a very, very difficult thing to deal with. Yeah, he was very instrumental in my first year in GATLA, and what he accomplished in me moved mountains. And there's no book, there's no theory, there's no thing I could have learned that was more gifting than his presence and I got the chance, the privilege to work with him as a client. And boy, was it like working with Pearls back it's like he was so incredible. I tend to be on the side that really was enamored with Pearls. I know there's mixed perception of him, and I appreciate that. For me, Bob was, being trained by Simkin and Pearls and having his tapes out. He was. It's a hard pill to swallow, and I feel very sad for his family, for Rita, for all of the people that he's touched. He's touched many lives, and I feel, unfortunately, not to be selfish, but very much cheated that I only got to work with him for a year, and very sad. I don't know how I'm going to assimilate this. He just died this month, and it's been very hard for all of us.
Yeah.
You can tell that a giant has fallen, a giant
Yeah.
source of wisdom in Gestalt.
I'm glad that we could open a space for your appreciation for him. I didn't know, I wasn't aware that you worked in person with him. So yeah.
Yeah, it was in Zoom, and I was a little bit afraid to go there, but you gave me some support, just enough to do that. I'm trying to be mindful of people mourning him right now, his family, his friends, his colleagues, and of course myself. And it really brought me in touch with my own death anxiety and just the people we love and those existential components. And it really propels me to really take more ownership in his honor and his legacy, because life is so unpredictable and so precious. And like Laura Prose would say, the concept of death is what propels the vitality of today, the creativity of today, right? I can see you smiling and seeing that my Gestalt nerding antics are reaching you, which is great, because most people look at me like I have 3 heads when I talk, but you're smiling, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. I like the idea of vitality. Probably that's why I smile. Yeah. Oh, there's a cat coming towards me and meowing at me. Okay. Interruption of content, deflection. We all know
that. A pleasant deflection, though. A pleasant. Who's the little fellow? What's the fellow's name?
I don't know. It's a random cat, and I'm allergic to cats. So yeah.
That's not good.
Well, talking about legacy and giants in Gestalt therapy, you know what? I was also curious about when talking about psychometric tests as the girl. Some people have to come up with all these items that would serve as behavioral indicators for personality dimensions, or conflict resistances. And investigating a little bit more, I found that, of course, they would ask Gestalt therapists, like expert of the field, to come up with these indicators. And then in the end, that's what my question is leading towards too. I feel also like that Gestalt therapy depend, like you said, there's a lot of difference in the concept. So it depends also a lot of who you ask, maybe. And I was just wondering if you came across any influence of different institutes while regarding these instruments that are used to measure contact resistances. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I haven't had a lot of exposure because, as you can imagine, a lot of Gestalt therapists are not very thrilled about research. And we don't have enough measures, in my opinion, which was the impetus for my dissertation. And what I found was a lot of stuff in development or occurring in the moment, like Susan Grossman was using the girl and other data, and they were trying to norm our own little Gestalt. I mean, what I'd like to see is our own version of Gestalt, mini mental status exams, or like our own DSM nomenclature, and more so for psychology, because I think psychology is unique in that it's both a part but also separate from the medical model, and we keep looking at it from medical model. Medication causes this, but that's neither here nor there. That's just another dialogue or discussion. In terms of Gestalt, though, I don't really see a whole lot beyond the girl. I haven't been up to date in true honesty and transparency with research since mine. I got a little burned out. I thought if I did Gestalt, it would shield me from burnout. No, it still kind of burned me out, because I got maybe even more because I got so obsessed with the literature. I was like a walking, regurgitating robot, as I'm sure you're experiencing now with your thesis. It's hard sometimes to not have the spillover from work and life, and they become fused, and you can't really discern the two. But yeah, my hope is that we find something that all the Gestaltists, that's a little bit, that seems a little bit out there to imagine happening, but we could agree on a standard way of measuring these resistances or interruptions or contact functions, or however you want to label it. Because I have to say, when I tried to present it to AAGT at that time, International Association Advancement for Gestalt Therapy, it was met with a little bit of a mixed perception or mixed review because of the word resistance, right? And so not everyone's probably going to buy into the Gestalt inventory resistance loadings because of the language, which is sad because it alienates people. And even if we could get past the name, which I agree, I tend to agree with the name, but I think people conflate resistance as something pernicious or evil. I don't think that. I think resistance can be very nourishing when it's called for, right? If someone breaks into my house, you would hope that I would get a little bit resistant, right? And so resistance isn't the bad guy here. But what's the problem? And Bob poetically and magically used to say this, is when it happens, in a character way, which means two things: the way we perceive Gestalten, the way we perceive, right, which sounds a lot like our traditional therapies today, schemata, schemes, etc. But also the way we kind of integrate ourselves. And so I prefer the word integration rather than character. And so with contact, if for example, some of the little markers we could do, I think, to comprise these interjects or resistances as, all or nothing thinking, either or, right? And we've seen some of that today in the modern third wave CBT approaches, which seems like it's incorporating a lot of the Taoism and Buddhism and components that Gestalt was heavily influenced with. But I can imagine that I could talk your ear off about that. But in terms of what do we have today? Because I think I see your point. It's viable to measure these things. And if it can create relief for people, if we can help people get more in touch with what they're doing, if it's nourishing to their needs, or if they're stuck in character, if they're able to regulate with, interdependence. And if they're, for me, the fascinating thing, Katarina, is I could feel myself getting passionate, is John Stevens' work, his book of, he defined it as awareness, explore, experiment, experience. For me, that's all you need to know in Gestalt, just that title. If we could truly take ownership of the here and now, what a beautiful world that would be. But how many of us do that, though? It's not like
I know, but could you repeat the title again, just to let it land?
Sure. The concept of awareness IQ, but the title is awareness, explore, experiment, experience. It's the 3 E's. I love it. It's so action oriented. It's dynamic. It's real time. It has vitality. It has spontaneity. All the things the founders talked about in the original seminal text, Gestalt therapy, excitement and growth and personality. And cats, they let you know where you stand up front. If only people could do that. People play games and introjects and projection and deflection and retroflexion. That's a really difficult one. And of course, in some contexts it's helpful, and in others it's debilitating, in my opinion.
Wow, thank you. We will definitely put a link to this book in the show notes of the podcast, right?
It's more so for me. It's more so the concept of it. Could we really get in touch with experiment, one of the foundational pillars of Gestalt, right? Can we start experimenting versus intellectual, didactic, and like Bob really, in our work together, Bob Resnick and I, he really helped me understand my own splits, my own contact interruptions. And I said, hang on a sec, I know what I'm doing. I read all the stuff. I know, I'm choosing to be intellectual and And I'm conscious awareness, and he told me, shut up. And
oh my gosh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he said, talk like a truck driver. And I don't think anyone could have reached me so deeply, so fast. Of course, I kicked and screamed the whole way. But what he had done for me was the gift of a lifetime. He helped me be more me.
Mm.
He helped me show up. I wasn't always showing up. I was stuck in intellection. You can tell I have a flowery way of writing in my dissertation, which is a time and place for it. But when I talk like that in general, it's sometimes like I mistake the menu for dinner. You know, I forget the whole of my experience. I'm so here. So it's like I have insight, which is what I think I know, but I don't have awareness, which is experience near and is what is happening.
Yeah, I can totally see myself in you. Yeah. I think probably my trainer would not tell me to shut up, but he would be a little bit more gentle with me. But yeah. So the point I was getting about also the whole research in Gestalt therapy topic is that we need to, and this is also what I want to do with the Gestalt Café, we need to be more in touch with one another, like more, we need to communicate more about the measurement methods, about the concepts. And what would be helpful is to find measurement methods that integrate different approaches or concepts. And this is a very big challenge, because as I said, it might also be the measurement method itself that would be already a hindrance for some approaches. Thank you so much. Oh,
yeah. So it looks like you and I have a lot of work ahead, and maybe we should coalesce and figure out a way to make it assimilable for folks, especially our Gestalt community, because it seems like they're very anti-research, which, don't get me wrong, I'm pro-research. I think you need research-based and practice-based. It's just that, you know, we have to be mindful and hold on to it loosely. That's the thing. That's the core. We can't be interpreting and playing experts. You have to hold it loosely and trust that the person knows themselves better than we know them. And if it fits, it fits, but otherwise things change, and we've seen how things have changed. But I think some of the core tenets of Gestalt therapy have remained pretty stable and pretty remarkable. For example, phenomenology, that's important, how we make meaning, and dialogue. Dialogue is so important, creating the field conditions for, you know, inclusion, and how we can, instead of try to eradicate difference, how we can, you know, meet each other, and the difference can create movement, and not try to play a character or hide or stay for the wrong reasons in marriages like Bob and Rita's work. And then you have field theory, which you could write a dissertation alone on field theory, right? And so there's so many beautiful areas in Gestalt that were all there. I think they need a more modern, contemporary organization, and GATLA's doing that. And many other places, institutes, Cleveland, Gestalt Institute of Cleveland is doing that. And, you know, but the thing is that, again, this is the core dilemma I find. The theory, much to your point, which I'm glad you're doing this work, is lagging to the best practice. And we need to find a way to understand that it's not a bad word to be evidence-based. And Gestalt is a giant that deserves to be in there. But unfortunately, it doesn't feel like it's getting the recognition that it could get if we had more researchers take it seriously and operationalize the terms and the resistances, et cetera, and find ways to show the utility in helping people improve their potential.
In order to discover their own potential, right?
Exactly. Their own potential. Isn't that a beautiful thing, to embrace our potential? It's a scary thing, right? it's a scary thing. I think Marianne Williamson's right about that. Our greatest fear is our capacity for light, not dark. It's our potential that I think frightens us most, not our shadow selves, as Jung will talk about. And I very much agree. I think when we see the capability we have, the ability to impact others, to contribute to our environment, to actually have the courage to be imperfect and get our needs met and try, even if it doesn't work, through the experiment and the experience part. So that's where I get really if only I could embody what I say. That's my work, right? It's sometimes hard to actually take ownership of experimenting and going after. So resistance to me will always be more along the Polster lines, which is resistance can be hindering of our growth and our needs, unless it's done contextually with awareness and choicefully, because that's the goal, right? Awareness, choice, change.
Yes.
And Katerina, as I'm talking a mile a minute in your ear off, surely, I'm curious, what's your take? I'm having this curiosity emerge in the foreground. What's your take on some of the more abstract, esoteric constructs in our field in Gestalt, like, for example, Arnold Beiser's paradoxical theory of change? I'd be very curious to hear your thought process on that, if you're comfortable to share.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very personal, this question, because I've done a podcast about what was like how Gestalt therapy found me. And I think especially paradox of change is something that my father's always been teaching me. So he would actually, in his education, teach me to sit with my emotions rather than to push them away, and to listen to my inner body processes, that is sometimes my way of deflecting, that I'm too attached to describing what I'm feeling in my body. But still, growing up with an awareness of actually being able to hold my emotions, and how emotions are transforming over a period of time, that they will definitely change, and being able to observe that gave me a lot of trust into this theory, which is then, for example, reinforced by meditation practices like Vipassana that I did. I participated like in one of these 10-day silent retreats, and where we would actually just observe the continuous flow of change within our within the phenomena of our awareness, right? So yeah, I think this is my own experience that meets very much the paradox of change also in Gestalt therapy, while being with what I am experiencing. There is a natural flow of energy that actually proves that there is always change if I'm really with what I'm experiencing right now. Yeah.
Wow, you brought so much life into that. And the way you talked about the emotion piece, I never quite conceptualized or organized it that way, but it's helping enlighten and enriching my understanding of it. That's really beautiful to read that.
Mm-hmm. Your picture just
kind
froze.
Of how I view you and your work.
Oh yeah. I'm seeing you again. You just said it's kind of how you view me and my work.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very much, I feel like you're very, you embody Gestalt very well.
You're very present and very thoughtful. I very much enjoy your way of being. There's a very calm, inviting tranquility to you that I think encourages people to join. It's inclusive and it's exciting. And you seem pretty aware too, self-aware of your own processes that might get in the way or
well, I'm trying. Yeah. And what I also like about the embodying part in the interviews is that people can actually get a little glimpse of what Gestalt therapy sessions might be like in terms of the being with each other. Yeah. So, Yousef,
that's the piece. That's the piece that I'm most taken aback by is the breathtaking pieces, especially your last interview. Is that was a wonderful. What was your trainer's name? I think audiences should definitely.
Dorothy Charles. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say the next time I come to California, I'll definitely invite you to my party to put it in your words.
I look forward to that. Yes, absolutely. I'll be hurt if you don't. So
I'll probably go to the Cleveland Institute first because I made friends there while staying at Esalen. So I'm looking for a way to go there next year.
It's never a dull moment for you, huh? You are like from country to coast to continent. You are just all over the place.
It's a special, it's a good opportunity at the moment to travel and writing the thesis online. That's true. Yeah.
I take it that you don't have any airplane phobia.
And I don't.
You face that fear contact.
I don't.
Yeah, that's amazing. Cleveland Institute, that's where I'm originally from in the US. And so I went to Kent State. I never quite got affiliated there, but they're doing phenomenal organizational group stuff with Gestalt therapy, kind of like industrial organizational. And then, of course, I've always wanted to see the New York Gestalt Institute where, where that's kind of the foundation in this country, right? And I hear from one of Bob's tapes is that they still have Fritz Perl's original mailbox for emotional reasons addressed for the business, which again, seeing you kind of in Esalen soak in the sun and the sound of the beaches and the seagulls was quite a surreal experience, and it made me quite jealous, I'll be honest. And I have to get myself to go up there. It's a few hours, but it's well worth it. You seem very refreshed during and after.
Yeah. Well, I wish you a very, very intensive and good Gestalt journey also without Bob. I appreciated that you talked about him, and I appreciated that you talked about your personal experience in the field of Gestalt therapy research. Thank you so much, Yousef.
Yes, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. And I wish you well, and I hope you continue. You've got, I think, like 30 of these podcast things already going. So sky's the limit. So we'll see. Good luck with your thesis.
Thank you so much. Bye, Yousef.
Okay.
Schön, dass du in dieser Folge im Gestaltcafé zu Gast warst. Wie immer lade ich dich zum Schluss ein, in deinen eigenen inneren Dialog mit dem zu treten, was du gerade gehört hast. Bis zum nächsten Mal.